I just want to make the point that the best story tends to win. And so let's talk about how that same principle can apply to your business. All right? Now, the thing that I want to head this off with, though, is that I want you to think about story. I'm going to ask you to think about story, the idea of story, a little bit differently than maybe you already do. We all know that storytelling is important for business. And the story that I just told you, the one about the cigarettes, that's a story. That's a classic type of a story. It's a vignette. It already happened, it's done, and I'm reporting on it. So story in business can take that form. We can tell the history of our company, the story of our company. Or we can tell case studies about things that happen with other customers, and those are illustrations of how our services work. That's not how I want to talk about story today. Today I want to talk about story as your business is currently an ongoing story. It is a story in progress. And the customers that you work with, the customers and clients that you work with, are the protagonist of that story. It's still happening, your story. It's not something done from the past that we're reporting on. It's still happening right now. How do you capture that in your marketing? Because if you can, that's the kind of story that gets people engaged. All right? Clarify the story. The only thing anybody wants to know when they first encounter your story is, what do you do and how will that help me? That's it. And now you probably already know this, but is it all reflected in all of your marketing? Can someone talk about what you do instantly and so they understand what you do instantly and talk about it and repeat it? Or is it difficult? If the first words out of your mouth when someone asks what you do or what your business is it's sort of complicated. Well, everyone's already bored. Sorry, goodbye. It can't be complicated. It has to be simple, and it has to relate to them, okay? So we know this. And I want to show you this. This is what they care about when they go to your website or see your marketing, but this is what they get instead sometimes. Here are the services we offer. We are passionate about getting results. Here are our core values and beliefs. Ooh, boy. Oh, boy. Everybody really cares about those. Here's a list of all my accomplishments and my credentials so that you will see me as an expert. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. And this is, now eventually they care about these things. Don't get me wrong. But not first, but this is what we often hit them with first, is this stuff. Whether it's a speaking engagement that you're doing, whether it's on your website, whether it's on some kind of print marketing, if anybody's still using that, wherever it is, often this is what they encounter first. Well-crafted though it is, it doesn't engage. Now, I want you to think about something, because this is what I'm orienting most of this to is professional services companies, okay, where the things are complicated. Let's look at the other end of the spectrum for a second and look at the type of a story that we're all very used to seeing.
My mom can be a little picky. Wendy, the peanut butter goes on top. I saw that.
So I was wondering what she'd think when I switched to Purex, which is half the price of her favorite brand.
Purex with dirt lift action works deep into the fibers of your clothes, leaving them amazingly bright and clean. A bright clean to impress even the toughest critics. Purex, bright clean, smart value.
Huh? Now, you may not have seen that particular commercial, but we've all seen that commercial. You know what I'm saying? Tell me, it's not that this is a difficult test right now, but tell me, what just happened? What was the story? Mom stole the detergent is what he got out of that. Picky mom. Who is our main character here? The daughter, Wendy. And what was her problem? Her mom was the problem. And what's sort of not really spoken, but it's just kind of inherent in the commercial, is she has dirty clothes. So she has to clean. The clothes have to get clean. So it's extremely clear and extremely simple. She's got an external problem, which is that she's got dirty clothes to clean. And she's got an internal problem, which is that she wants to please her mom, or she feels that if she doesn't please her mom, there will be consequences. So this all happened in 30 seconds. We had a protagonist with a problem who solved their problem by the use of this product, and we're done. Now that's laundry detergent. Everybody knows what laundry detergent is, and it's just a matter of making the best commercial about laundry detergent, and you're good to go. But if you have some complicated, multifaceted professional services company, it doesn't work. We all know it doesn't quite work that easily. But the customers want it to work that easily. They want it to be as simple as a laundry commercial, to understand what you do, how it's going to impact them, and how it's going to solve their problem in 30 seconds. Okay? That fast. They don't have an hour to listen to you talk about it. They want to know instantly what it is. And that's all a matter of navigating the language and the landscape of story. Okay? So let's be thinking about that as we go here. All right, so what in the world is a story? You all sort of know what one is, and I just delineated a few minutes ago the difference between a history, which is not the most interesting story, or a case study, which is a great thing to use, but not first. It's difficult to use those right away before they understand what you do. So what is just at its heart, what is a story? Well, story, of course, is something that as a theater professional I work with all the time. You have to engage an audience in a collection of characters and events and things that they don't necessarily know anything about when they walk in the door. I mean, they just saw the program and the poster or something. They don't know. It's like going to a movie. Going to a play, going to a movie, almost exactly the same thing. The movie gets to use quite a bit more visual language than a play does. Play has to rely much more on just spoken language, but still, you're introduced to a world you may never have thought of before. We, as the practitioners of theater, have to get you to be able to relate to it, even though you have no obvious link to these characters, and then care about them as they go through. So how do you do that? Well, it can be done badly, or it can be done well. One of my very favorite movies, Jaws. Has everybody seen this? There may be a spoiler or two ahead, so. It came out for its 40th like whatever celebration a couple years ago, and I went to see it in the theater. I've seen it like 30 times. I just watched it last weekend again. It's such a good movie. And it really is. It's just beyond. But here's the thing. It also follows a really classic story structure. So I'm going to use this as an example, not because it's the be-all, end-all story, but it's a very classic structure, okay? And most people have seen it and know what happens. So we're introduced at the very beginning of the movie to a location, an environment, which is called Amity Island. Looks a lot like Cape Cod. Martha's Vineyard in particular. But so there it is, Amity Island. And we're introduced pretty quickly to this guy. And this guy, Chief Brody, what he wants, basically, is for everything to be fine. Before he knows there's a shark, he's like, I just want the beach to be open and everything to be fine, okay? So that's his objective, and it's hard enough being the chief of police. And then he finds out he's got a really big problem. A shark eating people right off the beach. So he finds out that he has that problem, and he does not have any idea how to solve this problem. That's an external problem, shark eating people. We find out he also has an internal problem, which is that he's afraid of the water. So even if he did have the means to kill the shark, he doesn't want to go in the water. So he's got lots of problems. He calls in Richard Dreyfuss, who can't solve the problem either, even though he's got a really big boat with all kinds of technology. So they have to the two of them have to seek out another guy. Quint. Arr! Old man of the sea. And he comes on, he's got the expertise, and he's got the boat, and he's got the drive, and he just wants to get that shark. So they get out there, and they get that shark. But along the way, our guide goes away somehow. I won't spoil it for you, but it's a movie about a man-eating shark. I don't know what happened to him. So, and in the end of the movie, everything is resolved, because I just watched it a few days ago. I can tell you the very, very last, what does Chief Brody want at the beginning of the movie? A peaceful beach. The end of the movie is a is a visual of a peaceful beach. There's birds chirping and everything is fine. So it really, Spielberg is so good at this classic structure. Why do I bring this up? Because I love to talk about Jaws. But anyway, it's a classic structure that you can apply to the, as I told you first, ongoing story of your business that's reflected in your marketing. So let's see how that works. What we just talked about here is the classic story format. A main character who wants something. That's the first thing we are introduced to in any good story. Sometimes the main character is dual people or something, but we are introduced to someone that we are told, this is who we want you to follow through this whole thing. This even applies to these long episodic TV shows like Breaking Bad. Now that some of these are done, Breaking Bad or Mad Men, these things are all finished now. We view them as one person's story with other characters. Breaking Bad is Walter White's story with all these other characters. So it's really nice if we can follow a particular character through it. We also have to understand what they want right away. If we're confused about what the character wants, we're going to be confused and ultimately check out. So when I work with lawyers, I make sure that within the first minute, or at the very most 2 minutes of an opening statement, we know exactly who we're following, and, which I'll get to in a second, we know who the villain is in the story. We have to know these things, otherwise we cannot care about it. Think about Katniss in the Hunger Games. If you've seen that movie, she's got a big problem. She needs to win the Hunger Games or die. So we know what she wants, to live and succeed in the Hunger Games. It's very clear and very early in the story. We need to understand what success looks like to that character. They want something. What does it look like specifically? And what does failure look like? If they do not get what they want, what are the stakes, as we would say when we're working on scenes in theater? This is actually, speaking of that, this is a shape of an entire play or an entire movie, but it's also, actors will work a lot in rehearsal on this shape for an individual scene. What does this character want out of the other character by the end of the scene? And if you don't work on that stuff in rehearsal, it's going to be a pretty flat, dead play. Plays like Death of a Salesman, Streetcar Named Desire, that have been performed thousands and thousands of times, no two of those productions have ever been the same. That's not just because you change the actors. It's because they've worked on different versions of the objectives of the scene, of each individual scene, even though they're using the same lines. So this is something that keeps things alive when you work on it this way. All right, so you have success and failure. We don't know how it's going to turn out at the beginning, but we do know that there is some kind of a problem that our main character encounters. Right away, we're introduced to either a villain of some sort or some kind of problem that is in their way. Now, as I mentioned a second ago about the commercial and also Chief Brody, it can be external and internal. It's not always both, but it's really great if it's both. So a really classic example of an external-internal kind of conflict is a classic story like sort of a guy, the movie is about a bomb, there's a bomb that's going to go off in the city and blow everybody up. And the main character is the bomb diffuser guy. And that bomb diffuser guy has to get that bomb cleared out. That's his external problem. That's enough of a movie. But if you add in a layer where his dad was the best bomb diffuser that ever was, and he's a little worried that maybe he won't live up to dad's legacy, well, now you've got a really good movie. So we can relate on multiple levels, and he's got multiple conflicts. So that internal or external obstacle is a good thing to explore, and I'll show you how you do this for business in a moment here. Then the guide comes along. So I want to pause for a minute on this particular idea. The guide in the story is someone or something that comes along mid-story to help the protagonist out. So Quint in Jaws, the classic, of course, is Obi-Wan Kenobi in the original Star Wars. We're introduced to Luke Skywalker, who can't figure out what his journey is going to be until Obi-Wan comes along and says, here's what it is. So the guide character is a very important one. And that guide character has a plan they understand the main character, and they have a plan that provides action steps that's going to get them to their success and avoid failure. Okay? Now, here's the deal, you guys. In telling the story of our business, whether it's the history or whether it's some kind of marketing, who do we often make the main character of that story? We say, I did this, and I do that, and we do this, and we do that, and we have these services, and we, all the way home. We talk about ourselves quite a bit because we find ourselves quite fascinating. But nobody else does. I mean, somebody loves you. Somebody loves you. But in business, no. We're all self-centered. Ultimately, when it comes to doing business with another person, we just care about ourselves with them. But we, as the service providers, often will spend a lot of precious time at the beginning talking about ourselves. You're not the main character. You're the guide. You're in the middle of their story. And it's a classic marketing thing. Many of you have probably heard this before, but that's the classic position that you need to always be thinking of yourself in. Okay? So think about, you see the handouts that I have on the table there. Think about, there's not enough time to do this full out, obviously. But the first thing to consider when you start to apply this to your business is, who is your main character? And of course, that is, who is your main customer? Who is your key client? And try to zero in on really who they are. Like what position is it? Who's the main person that you're aiming for to engage with your services? And what do they want? What do they want? And here's the thing. I've worked with people now enough to know that what they usually, when I ask this question first, what does your key client want? They just want it cheap and fast. They want it done cheap, and they want it done fast, and they want it done really well. And I say, no, okay, yes, of course they want that, but let's dig a little deeper. What do they really want? What does success really what wakes them up in the morning? Not you and your service. Something else wakes them up in the morning too early and that they're worried about. That's where the answer to what their success is lies there. You got to dig a little deeper than they want it cheap, or that they want it fast, or that they want the process they're hiring you to do to go well. That's not necessarily what they're after. They, independent of you, want something. And if you dig deep enough, you can find it, and you can conversely also find what's at stake. What does it look like when they fail? When they fail to get what they really want, not just out of the service you are providing. You see what I'm doing here? Making sure that you distinguish yourself from their story, because you're going to help them with their existing story. Okay, so as soon as this, when I've worked with clients on this section right here might take hours to dig through all of the layers of what we think of first, to get down to really what is driving those characters, the clients being characters. Okay? All right, so we get that. We don't know how it's going to turn out. And we say, what is their problem? So now that we know, we got to do success and failure first so that we know what's in the way of their success and their failure. What is really, really blocking them from getting to that success? And if you think about it, usually this is where the clients will come up, that I work with, will come up with like a list of 10 things. It's like 1 million things that's in their way. But usually if you keep digging, you can get it down to sort of one thing or one category of things that's really in their way. And you can then break it into what's external and what's internal, just like we have for the stories in the narrative fiction. So think about this for a moment. Your key client, who are they? And what do they want? What do they want? And what's in the way? And if you start to think about that and write it down, you can then say, okay, now, of course, you are the guide. How do you understand their problem? If it is not apparent that you have empathy for their problem, again, they're going to check right out. They got to know that you actually understand from your own experience, from something in your demeanor that tells them that you understand, something that gets them to know this is a person I can trust actually knows what I'm going through. And then not only do you empathize and understand, but you actually have a plan. So you have the authority to say, now I understand and I know how to get you from where you are right now along to where you want to be, which is success. And then we get them to success and we avoid failure. Okay, so in a nutshell, that's how the same exact formula that works for Jaws or Romeo and Juliet or any classic story that really has stood the test of time, that same formula can apply to how you see your whole business, not just the history and not just the case studies. So to illustrate this, I'm going to give you a case study. Master Technology Group, a technology group that I worked with a few months ago on this. I'll show you how this worked out for them. Now, they were seen mainly as being the cabling guys. So they were low voltage cabling. So the type of stuff that connects your internet and your phone and stuff, they'd put all that stuff in. They've been doing that for 20 years, but they had really branched out and wanted to be known as more than just the guys who install your cabling. Because obviously there's higher levels to appeal to and more work to be had if you're not just the installing of cable guys. But they're having a really hard time articulating that. This is one of those companies where, you say, what do you do? And they go, well, it's complicated. We do many things. Why don't you, can we have coffee and talk about it? So by then it's too late. So I went, they said, we got to figure this out and see how we can get this to really be zeroed in on something that is not just the cable guys and actually is going to get us into the higher executive levels, okay? So I said, all right, who's your main character? And we talked about it, and we just boil it down to director. Now that seems really general, but that was useful for what we were doing here. They talked to many key clients and decision makers, and we just said if we just call it director, it's the person who has the decision-making power. In their case, that was fine to do that. And what does that director want? And again, what were the first things they said? Oh, they just want a smooth process. They just want it to be cheap. They just want, no. What do they really want? Competitive, profitable business performance. So that's what they want independent of you. They want to be competitive and seen as being competitive and cutting edge and up to date and naturally profitable. So that's what that director person actually wants. And what is failure? Blamed for decreasing stock value. Right? Get into that person's skin a little ways, and it's like that's what they're afraid of. It's going to be all their fault. They're going to be ousted, and the whole company's going to tank because of them. So how much of this has to do with cabling? Not much, but that's exactly what we wanted, is we wanted to see what does our character want, and then how can we start to serve that need? And we say, all right, well, their need, we put in the rest of this stuff, their external problem is they have out-of-date technology. So they want to get that fixed. That's non-emotional, completely just objective out here. What's the internal problem? They're afraid of making the wrong choice. And this is where the meat is. This is usually the best place for figuring out how to orient the marketing. That CEO, that director, is just freaked out by all of the choices out there that they have to face, and they're just crazy with anxiety that they're going to screw something up and it's going to cost millions and make nothing. So that's what that's what they're wrestling with inside. So now we can say MTG comes along as the guide, and they of course can solve the out-of-date technology problem, but they can also help reassure that that director is going to be in good hands and speak to that internal problem where they're afraid of making the wrong choice, right? And it turns out there's an 8-step process that simplifies the complex. We loved this phrase, we simplify the complex. Because that seemed to appeal to the nervousness, the anxiety of the director. It's too complex for them. Again, we're talking to the decision maker, not the person they'll probably have to be dealing on a tactical level. The person way up here that's actually their anxiety is what we need to speak to. And so we put this whole thing together, and that's how it looks. Now this one took a full day and a half, I think, to come up with this stuff. There's a lot more that goes into it than just This is the end result up here on the screen. There's a lot of discussion and a lot of sort of wrong answers that come along, and then you zero in on what actually is going to work. Here's another case study just to show you a different type of industry. Isn't she nice? Look at her. This is the wedding shop, which is right down here on Grand Avenue. And I worked with them in the same capacity, and this is how it went with them. Who's our main character? This is really easy. Oh, look at that. Well, actually, we did say maybe it's the mother-in-law or the mother of the bride. Yeah, it could be. We said, that just kind of muddies the water. Let's call it bride. It's her day, controlled by everybody else, but it's her day. And what does she want? Now, this was interesting because what does she want up here? The first thing they said was, the first thing, of course, was a cheap dress. And I'm like, do you really want to be the cheap dress people? I mean, a cheap dress, no, yes, but come on. And the wedding of her fantasies. And I'm like, yeah, okay. But every single person in the wedding industry is saying that. It's going to be the rainbow or whatever it would be, the fantasy. It wouldn't be the rainbow wedding. The wedding of your dreams. Yeah, okay, whatever, cliche. So we really dug, and what came out of this was that social media impact. We went, that's what she actually wants. She wants to post this stuff on Instagram and have everybody think she's awesome. So that's what she's actually after. Obviously, to get that, you have to have a great wedding and a nice dress and all this. But this is what's driving that bride. And they went, yep, because this was the leadership from this company, but we also had like about 4 of their leadership team were like women who were under 30, who were like 22 to 28. So they were like, these are our peers. I can tell you that's what they want. So I went, great. And what's the failure? Really easy again. A terrible wedding. Yeah, no. So what would we do? No, yeah. So now we've established that, and we go, now we're talking about some interesting stuff here. And we say, what's her problem, other than the controlling mother? What is the problem? Well, external, of course, it's a lot to coordinate. And the bride is charged usually with doing it because the groom is like, what, we haven't, when is the wedding? When? So it usually falls to the bride, and that's her external problem. That's a lot to coordinate. Her internal problem is there's high expectations. Most important day of your life ever. And I didn't put it up here, but another thing that came up was logical thinking was in the way. A wedding is illogical. Let's spend $50,000 on one party, So yeah, so logical thinking was in the way, but more of it was the expectations and the anxiety that went along with that. So that's emotional, okay? And then of course, wedding shop becomes the guide. They have a plan. They didn't really know it till we talked through it, but they're like, you know what? If we really talk about this a while, it looks like we actually have a 4-step process. But they didn't really know they had a 4-step process till we talked about it. And it was more like a 9-step process. And I went, can we just group these together? Nobody wants a 9-step process. 4-step process. And but more importantly, specialized consultants that can walk you through the process. So this isn't just retail, go in and get a dress off the shelf. This was you get actual attention. So that was a differentiator for them. And it helps get our bride to her social media impact, avoiding the terrible, terrible wedding. So I whipped through those really quickly to show you how this applies. The same exact formula. This is based on, centuries of narrative tradition. Donald Miller, the book's Building a Story Brand, gets into this exactly the same way. It's it's just a classic format for putting together marketing that has a story impact, in addition to your case studies and the history of your company. So this takes a while, and you put it together, and you have some nice concepts to work with, but then what do you do with it? Well, you can do a lot of things with it. I can I've helped people build a presentation around it, all kinds of stuff like that. But one really quick thing that I can walk you through in the time we have left here, 10 minutes, is how we can take this sort of new narrative view of your company and boil it down to a 10-second version of it. Usually 2 to maybe 3 sentences, okay? So that's taking this, the parts that zero in on the parts of the equation that are the narrative. Main character with a problem uses a plan for success, and then we put it into sentences. So in my case, my own one would be professional service businesses have a hard time talking about what they do. So in that half, that one sentence, I've captured a character, professional service businesses, and what's their problem? They have a hard time talking about what they do. By using story techniques, I help them connect with their customers or connect with clients and grow their business. So now my plan is, or the thing I use is the story techniques, and I help them connect with their clients and grow their business. Again, that's my client's view of success is that, not telling a better story. It's that, right? So 2 sentences boil down the whole thing with the client front and center. Very first character you hear about is the client, not me. So the way we did this for the wedding shop, brides are often overwhelmed by coordinating the most significant day of their lives. So that's our character and our character's problem, overwhelmed with coordinating this big significant day, all the pressure. And what does Wedding Shop do? Our specialized consultants partner with you to ensure that you will own your day. Doesn't that rock? That came out of, again, this was a conversation. How are we going to, we had so many versions of this. What are we going to call it? What is confidence? Something about confidence. And this 22-year-old, I think she was 20, that was sitting there at the table with us said, she just wants to own her day. And I was like, that is gold. That is gold. Own your day. So it has this kind of like a little bit of a more current sounding vernacular to it. Own your day. Now they want to use this everywhere. We help you own your day. So it's really got an application like that. And again, that's the end result success for that main character, the bride. For your mother-in-law can also own the day a little bit. So she did pay for the whole thing, so she. MTG, Master Technology Group. Technology is moving fast, and a lot of business leaders get overwhelmed by all the choices. So again, we have an overwhelming thing. They get overwhelmed by so many things, and they don't feel they have a partner. So there they are. This is the business leader wants something, and something's in the way. They don't have a partner. Who are we? Well, we have cutting-edge experts and an 8-step process to help you make the right choices for your business. Now this is planted right front and center on their homepage. First impression people have is this. When before it was a picture of a bunch of cables. So you'd go there and go, I don't need cables. I don't have a cabling problem. Click and you move on. Now it's like, ooh, I am overwhelmed by all the choices. I want to read further about this. So what I've just done here in our short time together is sort of whip you through the basic idea of how narrative works and how that can be applied to a macro view of your business and boiled down to as micro as just a 10-second, 2-sentence version of it. This has application all over the place. And when I work with people on this, it's anything from a conversation or two that just gets into some of the wording, all the way to this whole big process that may result in these taglines and phrases or presentations that are given in high stakes, high impact pitch kind of arrangements. And I would love to keep in touch with all of you on that. But before, let me see, we have like 5 minutes. All right. So are there any questions in the room here about this or any other thing? Yes, sir.
What do you think is the worst possible ad or in popular culture or movie that has done it wrong in your opinion?
Well, I won't get into bad movies. I guess that's a different thing. I can't think of a specific ad, but we've all seen the ads that I think are the most, the least engaging are like, I don't know, auto body repair or something like that, where they just flash a whole bunch of stuff that they're going to do and all of their prices and all of their, the deals they're going to give you. And that's the kind of thing that I just go, that's exactly the wrong way to go. So more of a general answer, but that's what I would say.
Yes. So what do you do if your company offers a wide variety of different things, and if you don't exactly know when you're having an initial conversation what the problem is that the other party is facing? This.
I would say that's a good example of thinking too much on the ground level too early. You can imagine, you know your clients well enough. You can use your imagination and go, generally, what is the problem they're having in a broad aerial view way. If you can speak to that kind of wake up in the middle of the night anxiety, that's all you need for this. Once you get into a conversation with them and deeper into the relationship, you can start to say, now you don't know the specific application that's going to relate to you maybe, but you can get to that with some conversation. Always keep your eyes on the largest problem that they're having and speak to that as often and as soon as possible, and then you'll get those other answers. Yeah?
Do you ever think about differentiating between a vision for success and the way that success is measured? So, for example, with the bride, it would be that her vision of success is to be the most beautiful woman in the room, if not the world, and the way that that's measured is in terms of social media content.
That's a good question. You say, do I ever think of that in what capacity? Like to do what?
Well, I suppose it's part of the storytelling, and I imagine it would be helpful for business owners who are using your services and then taking them out and using them in marketing capacity. So the wedding shop, what is their problem? They want to be known for the best gowns and the best comprehensive wedding services in St. Paul, and how do they measure that? Is based on revenue growth, client satisfaction, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it might be another level of, yes, complexity, which you don't want, but also proof and verification of a successful process.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that would come later on in the process. So a lot of what this is about is first impression, and the first impression says we're going to solve it. We're going to solve the actual problem you're really having, and not the more superficial one. And then after it is solved, we can measure and show the metrics on how that has resulted. I think that's what you're saying. And yeah, but it's a matter of layers. I spend a lot of time, excuse me, on the very first impression. With the lawyers in the opening statements, for example, we spend the majority of our time together on that first 2 minutes. Because if you haven't hooked them in the first minute even, in something that's that high stakes, you're just going to be backpedaling the entire way, and it's up against it. So that would be a little bit deeper in, I think, is what you're talking about. Other questions? Yes, sir.
Why is this so hard for smart people?
Why is this so hard for smart people? I think in all seriousness, I think that's because smart people tend to think of a lot of details. And if you're thinking of the details too soon, especially the details that are about you, it'll do nothing but keep you in the weeds. So it's I guess, what do the dumb people do? Anybody know what the dumb people do? They don't know any details. It's like, so the trick is to keep above the weeds, to get this stuff worked out, so that when you go into the weeds, it has meaning for the client. It has context for the client. We tend to go right there because we want to. Sometimes we want to show off how smart we are, and sometimes we just haven't thought in the aerial view for so long that all we can think of is the details, and it's off-putting to people. They just don't. They don't need that degree of detail. It's the really seriously, it's the number one thing I unscramble with people if I'm working on opening statements or classic business presentation skills, construction of the business, or this kind of thing, is getting out of the weeds, is don't get into the details so fast. Lawyers do it all the time, but so does every other professional service. And the smarter you are and the more of an expert you are, the worse it is, I guarantee you, unless you've really worked on it. So, yeah, Rick?
A lot of businesses are more, say, commodity aspect. You gave a couple of examples that are kind of niche businesses for something lawyer, with all due respect, or banker, or where there's really a lot of competition. So how do you tweak the model in a niche business, like I would do a bridal shop versus a kind of more commodity-esque kind of thing?
Well, there's, I think that the first answer I would have to that is by doing some of this at all, you will rise above a lot of people. By just speaking in customer-centric terms all the time and speaking to their emotional needs all the time, you'll rise above half the competition right there. And then the rest of it is then wordsmithing and images and stuff that go along with it that can differentiate you. But it's a good question because these are a little bit more niche than that. And then the other thing, too, is I didn't really mention about something like financial services that have many applications, or like MTG has this. There's the macro story of the whole company, and then you can do this whole treatment on each division. There might be like 4 divisions that you focus in on, and then those can also be there, and they're all a little bit deeper dive on customer-centric stuff for that particular division, and that can help differentiate, too. Yes, ma'am.
You had mentioned having to plan the enforcement process.
Yeah. I was asking.
Yes, I do. So she's saying, if you couldn't hear her over here, that I made a disparaging remark about the 9-step process. And I say, yeah, because 9 is a lot to hold in your mind. And 3 or 4 is about all we can really retain. And all of this is again coming from the land of the spoken word delivered story, which is stories on stage as an actor. People aren't writing that stuff down. They don't get a PowerPoint later. They don't get notes on it. You have to make an impression with your words alone. And if you give them 9 or 10 or 15 or 27 things to keep track of, they're just going to forget it. No one has that kind of brain space for that. But if you give them 3 or 4, they can go, and then you word them really simply. So step 1 is like 1 word, and really simple, they will get it. I guarantee you can take anything that you think has 12 parts and make it 3 or 4 parts if you try hard. It doesn't mean reduce it, cut stuff out. It means group it differently so that it feels like 3 and doesn't feel like 9. And that's the only reason I say that. It's for retention, really, in the listener, the client. Yeah?
Can you model for us, I follow the story, it makes perfect sense to me on the website. Could you take, for example, the wedding shop and pretend you're at, I don't know, some sort of business mixer sort of thing, and you're going to introduce yourself and someone says, what do you do? How do you take that story and convert it to...
That's a great question. Let me back up to it. It was this one. This wording is intentionally crafted to be speaker friendly, so that it doesn't. I'm so glad you brought that up, because people, when they want to get into what they're going to print on their website, they will sit there with their writer mind, or they'll hire writers who will come up with really beautifully written stuff that no one would ever say. No one would ever say it with their voice. They'll do some paraphrase version of it that will now lose the whole thing you paid that consultant to come and write for you. So this is intentionally crafted so that you would actually say this. I mean, it may not be the very first thing. You might say, hi, how are you? These snacks are good, and it's a nice day outside, and whatever. So what do you do? Well, I'll tell you, a lot of times brides are overwhelmed by coordinating the day. It's like the most important day of their lives. So our specialized consultants will partner with them and help them own their day. So I changed a little bit of it and changed the orientation from you to there. You can do little tweaks like that. But it's got enough kind of like casual language in it that people will say it. And I actually encourage, like, once we work this out, go teach it to your whole staff. have it be something they actually memorize. They can memorize 2 sentences. People always say to me as an actor, how can you memorize all that? Well, your brain you can memorize language, but 2 sentences, you can really memorize 2 sentences. So I would say that's the main thing with that, is trust that actually the language can be spoken. And then after these are all crafted so that the next thing that happens is they go, well, tell me more about that, or something, so that now it's going to be more of a free-form conversation. But it's going to focus on things like specialized consultants and owning the day, rather than, we got a deal running through Saturday, and... So is that about our time, chum? All right, so as I said, give me a call. I would love to work with all of you on this. It all starts with a conversation. I just like to talk with people on the phone or sit down for coffee and just find out where you're at. That's all it is. My contact information is on that form in the middle there. You can also, or the handout, and I've got my cards up here. I'll be around for a while. Love to meet you all, and thank you very much.